Hey, this is Deathface. I make stuff for you to throw right into your D&D games, and today we're making a dungeon treasure haul. The Dungeon Master's Guide has lists, random tables you can just roll on and say, alright, this is what's in the dungeon you just completed, or your reward for completing a quest, a bounty from a baron, whatever. But it's random. It's not really curated. There's no real reasoning behind any of those items being given. And so the point of this series is for there to be a selection of treasure for a specific type of dungeon, a specific quest, a specific setting, as well as like the whole thought process behind making that list, so that you can make it again if make something similar but not the same in the case that you happen to run a similar scenario but want to shake things up a little bit. And so the first step to making this treasure haul, which is going to be in line with the typical beginner high fantasy setting, so it's just going to be like the rewards for clearing out a goblin den. So the first step in making that reward list, that treasure list, is actually the monster manual. So instead of just looking at treasure and thinking, oh, this would be good for them at this level, you go and read your monster manual and you see what is there about the denizens of that dungeon that tie into specific items, treasures, whatever. And so you could read through the all different paragraphs about the goblins, and you could see they work with bugbears and they work with hobgoblins. So you could also look at those stat blocks, those little lore paragraphs, to see what else would be fitting in a goblin den. And you could also see that, oh, they have their god, they have Maglubiet. What can you give them that ties into Maglubiet? And not and this is still universal. It's not specific to Faerun. It's not specific to the Sword Coast, because you could see that Maglubiet is typically a battle-scarred goblin with black skin and fire erupting from his eyes. And so then you could just think alright, well, I'm not gonna include Maglubiet into my settings pantheon, but I will, use those motifs. Maybe they have jewelry with garnets or another red gem, and that's on some sort of black metal. Just use that motif in the decorations and pricey art pieces that these goblins have. Because another thing you could do to beef out a treasure haul, which you might not always think to do, is just differentiate money. Because you have gold pieces, you have silver pieces, you have all the different types of currency, but then you also have gemstones, you also have art pieces, which really are just there to be sold or be used as spellcasting components. But at the lower levels, they're really only there to be sold, and so it's just money, but it's in a different shape. It just shakes things up a little bit, adds a little bit more depth, because instead of it just being oh yeah, they have money, it's that, oh, they have these chalices that are black steel with red gems, because it's the motif of Maglubiet. And so that's what you could take from like their lore and then apply it to like what you pick out when you go through the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook. So now let's look at hobgoblins and bugbears. So the bugbear, it's a very brutish, very battle-driven enemy. So you could assume that in their treasure, in their like pile of riches, there would be a lot of weapons, there would be a lot of armor, there would be a lot of like military themed items. And then also hobgoblins, you could see they, like in their lore, they claim land with abundant resources. So you could say, alright, in their treasure hoard, there should be plenty of fresh food in terms of like what a goblin would consider fresh food. And so it's just, you look in what their lore is, and there's plenty that you could just add to the treasure hoard that really thickens the list of what they find without thickening like the coin purse. And so it's just diversify and flavor the treasure hoard in terms of what is in just these small paragraphs tied to the monsters that are in the dungeon, that are running the dungeon. And so I'm going to look through the Player's Handbook and Dungeons Master's Guide, and then I'll come back with a list of what will be in this goblin den. Alright, so I just wrapped up making the list of the treasure that would be in the this hypothetical goblin den. And so as you can see, there's this whole first page of stuff that would be in there before it even gets into any sort of like monetary reward for the players, sorta. But so to go through it, there's 3 things from the oh my, it's written there. The Player's Handbook trinket list. So there's a shard of obsidian that always feels warm to the touch, because that felt sort of in line with the whole goblin idea of what Maglubiate looks like. A tiny sketch portrait of a goblin. This is something that more so belongs on a goblin that like is just in the den, but it's still like a an item found in the den, not necessarily in the treasure hall, but just to give an idea of like characterizing the enemies in an area. A hilt from a broken sword, which would act as a recolored large gold bracelet, which comes into play down here. It's not large though, and it's only 50. Okay. And then I moved on to looking through adventuring gear, and then weapons, and then armor. So adventuring gear, it's stuff like alchemist fire, arrows, a holy symbol emblem, which would be an emblem of Maglubiate, hunting trap, manacles, torches, and healing potions. All stuff that like they would they would likely be using, whether it be for like hunting and like catching prey, using in combat, or like restoring themselves, healing themselves, because they're not like they're sentient, they're like they could speak, they can communicate, they have colonies. These are smart creatures. They would know to use healing potions, they would know to use these things. And then the weapons and the armor, it's just stuff that is typically lower level, it's weaker, and it's also stuff you find in the stat blocks of goblins, of hobgoblins, of bugbears, you know, what would be in these dens. You would assume that they have like a stockpile of what they use in case what they're currently using breaks or whatever. And then in terms of money, it really is it's like a bit of a list, but in total it's only a like smidge over 500 gold pieces, which like with a party like of 4 to 5 players, that's just over 100 gold pieces per player, which in like the long run is not a lot of gold pieces. Like they could maybe get some better armor, but it really gives you as the DM room to start charging them for a lot of things. Like you just gave them 100 gold pieces, now you could charge them for room and board. You can't say like, oh, since they're the heroes there to fix the problem, they're given a free room. They could pay for transportation now. They could get their own horses. By giving them a big but not that big amount of gold pieces early, it really allows you to open the door to like your world's economy and like let them really engage with buying stuff other than just buying weapon upgrades. But like the breakdown of that all is a couple of gemstones, 2 gold bracelets. One of those is that recolored broken sword hilt, which would be like a black metal hilt with a like red gem, and like to hammer home that like Maglubiate motif. And then in terms of like the actual like pieces of money, it's a majority not gold pieces. It's all converted into gold pieces here, but it's like you're getting thousands of coins from this dungeon, because you know they're goblins, they're raiders. They would like realistically have a huge stockpile of people's pocket change. It wouldn't really all be gold pieces. They would have a lot of silver, a lot of copper in there too. And so like to represent that, like gold pieces are less than half of the entire money haul, and it really just makes the den and the whole like existence of those goblins there feel more real, feel more realistic to the context of the setting and what they've been doing. And so with this list, you could just throw it into like any goblin dungeon you're running and say like, oh yeah, you find this, you find this, you find this, and not necessarily like in a huge pile at the end of the dungeon. You could like break it up, throw a little bit there, throw a little bit there, like as with the this trinket here. But it all just makes the den feel more full. It makes it feel more lived in, and it's a more like realistic treasure haul for a goblin den compared to just rolling dice on the challenge rating 0 to 4 random treasure list in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So yeah, see ya.